What up, y'all? It's Chris here to talk about this upcoming Bernard Hopkins versus John Pascal fight going down this Saturday. Um, I don't know if I'm looking forward to it or not. I don't really look forward to watching Bernard Hopkins fights because I just don't think his fight style is all that appealing. It's just not all that aesthetically pleasing to watch at this stage of his career. The good thing about this fight, though, the one positive heading into it is when it was announced to be on Showtime pay-per-view. And I really, aside from Justin Strikehardt, I really don't know too many people that were actually interested in purchasing it. Not to say he was interested in purchasing it, that I think would have purchased it. I know I would not have. But thankfully, the team over at Showtime or Showtime Networks, whatever, they smartened up, decided to put it on the regular Showtime broadcast where it belongs. This fight is for Jean Pascal's 175-pound title, light heavyweight title, the one that he lifted from Chad Dawson. That fight actually, was a bit of a surprise. I wanted Pascal to win, but I believe I picked Dawson to win that fight. It ended on a technical decision, accidental cut from a headbutt, I believe it was. Stopped the fight in the 11th round, went to the scorecards, and Pascal got the decision. And I thought deservedly so. I thought he did enough to win that fight. Although he was running into a little bit of trouble late there. It might be best for him that it ended when it did. As for Bernard, he's coming off the win over Roy Jones. Take it for what it's worth. That fight, honestly, that fight is almost irrelevant. When you go back and look in the history of boxing 10, 20 years from now, sure, it'll always show on the record books that Bernard Hopkins got his revenge against Roy Jones, which is something, he'd been wanting to do for the longest time. But anyone that's around currently and saw that fight or knows about that fight knows it doesn't really hold the significance of their first bout. Roy Jones just is unfortunately a shell of himself, and at that fight, he just wasn't even really there to do much but get a paycheck and survive, in my opinion. But that was a dreadful fight anyway. Bernard Hopkins was complaining of low blows, getting hit in the back of the head, just doing a lot of complaining that he'd been doing later in his career. He did in the Calzaghe fight as well. Kind of funny to see a guy named the Executioner, nicknamed himself the Executioner, be complaining like that in the ring like a girl or something. But it's whatever. Bernard Hopkins uses all the tricks out there that he can to his advantage. As for this fight, Hopkins, height advantage, reach advantage. Goes without saying he's got the experience advantage. Got to give Pascal the edge in speed. I don't know about strength. Pascal is a little bit smaller and light heavy. He used to fight at us for middleweight. His frame, like height-wise, stature-wise, he's a little bit short for the division, but he's pretty stocky. He's pretty quick. Has good power. I don't really know who has more power of these guys. Not like it matters. Bernard Hopkins isn't really a power puncher at this stage of his career, but I was talking about this fight yesterday on the Science Science Radio show, and my co-host said that he was going with Hopkins because of Hopkins' craftiness, just the way he fights, his experience, and how he makes it a dirty fight and gets away with it. Hopkins he's a great strategist. That's one of his best attributes in still fighting at this age. He's a great strategical fighter, and he's able to turn the fight into the kind of fight that he wants. And whenever it's going that way, it's obviously not going good for his opponent. However, as I said on the show yesterday, I don't know how much that Bernard Hopkins is going to be able to get away with. This fight is in Canada, where Jean Pascal is fighting out of. And that's another thing I'm excited for this fight, or looking forward to, I should say. I'm not excited, at least not overtly. Whenever these fights go down in Canada, like the Butte Pascal fights, fights like that, big crowds, real lively environment. I think it really adds to the atmosphere of the fight, and it adds to the fight in general when you got crowds that are really invested into it. But as I was saying, I don't know if the referee being up there in Canada is going to let Hopkins get away with the usual quote-unquote dirty tactics that he employs during fights, the grappling, the punches to the hips, occasional punches down below the border, forearms, just some of the stuff that Hopkins does in there, and is able to get away with most of the time at this latter stage of his career. The referee might be quicker to admonish him trying that stuff, and who knows, he might even get a point deducted early on, which could have him go away from trying to employ those tactics throughout the fight as he normally does. So don't be surprised if the referee doesn't allow Bernard Hopkins to do some of those things that he normally does in there. And if he doesn't, Bernard Hopkins is going to be complaining about both before and after the fight. As for the matchup and who I favor, I actually favor now. Full disclosure, I did pick Kelly Pavlik to beat Bernard Hopkins, and boy was I wrong about that one. I was obviously way off on that one. He dominated Pavlik. Pavlik hasn't really looked the same since, but Hopkins was a few years younger then, and Pavlik doesn't really bring the same tools to the table that Jean Pascal does. one more thing I want to mention about this fight before I forget. I remember someone said recently, I think it was on Twitter, I read where, Bernard Hopkins has been making a lot of noise in the press about Manny Pacquiao avoiding African American fighters and fighting all these other fighters but not African Americans. But they pointed out that Bernard Hopkins himself avoided Chad Dawson, who'd been calling him out forever, yet is fighting a Haitian fighter in Jean Pascal. Not only that, but the fighter that beat Chad Dawson. So you wouldn't fight Chad Dawson, but you'll fight the fighter. You'll take on the guy that beat him. I don't know. It just goes to show, a little bit of hypocrisy there on Bernard Hopkins' case, in my opinion. And it's not even my opinion. I mean, it is hypocrisy. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. It's just a point that I found interesting, and I thought I would bring up, as I remembered it. But as for this matchup, personally, I'm going to favor Jean Pascal. Sure, Hopkins got that huge experience advantage, but in this latter stage of his career, he's been a lot more economical with his punches, to put it lightly. Even in the Roy Jones fight, he just doesn't throw that many punches anymore. And he lands his fair share, but not an overabundance of punches. And sure, he was able to get away with that against Roy Jones, but like I said, Roy wasn't really there to win the fight, in my opinion. Roy was kind of just there to survive. No disrespect. He's not going to be able to get away with that with Jean Pascal. He's not going to be able to throw 15, 20 punches around. That may be exaggerating, but you get the point. And be able to win the fight because Pascal's going to be a lot more active. He's going to throw a lot more in there, and if nothing else, he'll win a lot of the rounds on the judge's scorecard based on activity alone. Of course, you also got to wonder what the crowd and the judges, the crowd sometimes can influence the judges. We don't know who the judges are going to be yet. They could favor Pascal as well, just being the local fighter, depending on where the judges are brought in from. But I just think stylistically that Pascal is a good fight. Obviously, Hopkins thinks it's a good fight for him. That's why he chose to fight him and avoided Dawson all those years. Or not all those years, but all those previous times when Dawson was calling him out. But I think Pascal's got the speed and the skill to be able to beat Bernard Hopkins. As long as he's been getting that clinching game, get inside with Hopkins. Hopkins likes to do a lot of clinch work, dirty work inside. But I think Pascal can be able to avoid that, like I said, with his speed. And, just outbox him. I mean, it's hard to say someone's going to outbox Bernard Hopkins because he is a masterful boxer in there. But, like I said, he just doesn't have the work rate or the activity rate. And he doesn't really have the power, I don't think, to really threaten Jean Pascal. Hopkins was never really a big power puncher, and definitely not later on at this stage of his career and at the higher weight. So I think Jean Pascal's going to win this fight. I just think, like I said, he's going to be more active. He's going to land the bigger punches, whether or not they affect Hopkins. Hopkins, if nothing, I was going to say if nothing else, Hopkins got a lot going for him, but one of the most solid chins / beards in boxing throughout, his time in the sport. So even though Pascal's a pretty good hitter, I don't think he's ever really going to hurt or bother Hopkins there. But his punches, by being big punches and flashy punches, they may impress the judges, and sway the judges in certain rounds. So I just don't really see obviously Bernard can win this fight. There's a lot of ways he can win it. That's what I need to do. When I have a guy who you got to win, I got to give reasons why the other guy should win. If Hopkins can make it his fight, more of an inside fight, and just kind of frustrate Pascal throughout, he can win the bout, but I just don't see it happening. But once again, I didn't see him beating Kelly Pavlik, and until I actually watched the fight, then I did see it, and I was humbled quickly. But I favor Jean Pascal for the reasons I said: more active, bigger punches landed, and Hopkins would be smart to go to the body early. But he is a good body puncher, but I don't even know how close he's going to be able to get to Pascal. Pascal's smart; he'll kind of stay at a distance and at range, and not get inside and fight that dirty fight with Bernard Hopkins. Give Hopkins the chance to take advantage of the situations that benefit him the most or would benefit him the most. So, anyways, that's it for now. Not a whole lot to say about this fight. Video probably went longer than I expected it to or planned on it being, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the fight. Are you looking forward to it? Who do you favor? And if Bernard Hopkins loses, do you think it's time for him to retire? Also, regardless of who wins this fight, I want to see the winner fight Tavoris Cloud. I hope it's Jean Pascal because I think a Jean Pascal versus Tavoris Cloud fight would be an awesome fight at light heavyweight. So that's it for now. Once again, I talked about this fight yesterday on the Science of Violence radio show. As we'll be talking about it afterwards next Sunday. Link in the information part of the video as usual, as well as a link to my Twitter. But yeah, that's it for now, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are, and until next time, I'm out.